Hi everyone, it's Melissa again. One more thing I wanted to tell you about the book. After telling you in a nutshell what it's about, I wanted to share some of the lighter side of the book. In it I use my personal experiences and some of the experiences of my clients to explain things a little better. One story that I think encapsulates exactly what I want to accomplish with this book is a story about a gentleman I met while working as a librarian and archivist at the Waltham Public Library in Massachusetts. Mr. Ryan was an elderly gentleman who came to me to donate his papers, and this is his story. While working as the archivist at the Waltham Public Library in Massachusetts, I took in a collection of papers related to one of the biggest celebrations Waltham ever saw. In the 1990s, in an attempt to document the town and to raise community pride, the Watch City launched its Waltham Rediscovered project. Town residents participated in separate parties celebrating the heritages of Waltham's many immigrant groups. People brought photos, documents, and objects to these events that showed their family history and their community roots. The celebrations culminated in the writing of a book that stands as a testimonial of the diversity of Waltham's populace. I accessioned the research papers related to the project for the library. Among the materials that the project coordinator and historian had gathered with her volunteers were some of the personal papers loaned by city residents. These materials were given so they could be duplicated for publication, but no formal written agreements had been signed that would give the project the rights to keep the materials. I set about procuring the signatures I needed to make this a proper donation. This would allow library patrons to view and use the items with the blessings of the individuals whose papers were included in the collection. Among the Waltham Rediscovered materials were papers from Waltham's Ryan family. Albert M. Ryan II and his twin brother Henry had deep roots in the Waltham community. Family members had lived in town for generations. My box of materials included postcards, photos, and drawings of Albert Ryan I, who was a city employee and town historian. I wrote to the brothers and asked if they wished to have the materials from Waltham Rediscovered returned, or if they would like to make a home for them at the library. I asked if they would sign some papers granting the repository formal permission for the materials' keeping and use. Mr. Albert Ryan's response to me began a year-long correspondence that introduced one of the most interesting collections of family papers that I have ever encountered, and one of the nicest library patrons I have ever met. Mr. Ryan wrote that he was in the process of sorting through his papers. He wanted me to keep what I had and indicated that he had more to bring. At 82, and after the recent death of his twin brother, he wrote he wanted to pass things on. I expected more materials from the town historian, and indeed his notebooks and scrapbooks were included among the materials I was later given. But there was more from many generations of Ryans. The Ryans had not only lived in Waltham for a long time, family members also participated in recognizable activities that marked major historical events in American history. Through the Ryan papers, we got a strong sense of the passing of generations and what it was like to be born in Waltham among many generations of a family that stayed rooted there. The city had been the birthplace of the Industrial Revolution, though that title in common knowledge has been displaced by the city of Lowell. Lowell was established a decade later further north on a faster flowing river that was more conducive to the textile work of Waltham's entrepreneurs. When we think of the city of Waltham, we still think of those industrial roots, however. Mr. Ryan brought me items that he himself had carefully labeled. He identified who was in pictures and who wrote documents. He described the relationships between his family members. He also noted his memories about certain places in Waltham that no longer existed or the role a place played in his life. He sat and talked to me and answered questions I had about his family and their relationships. I recorded his responses in my accession records, which are the official papers archivists keep when taking in new collections. Mr. Ryan gave the library the letters of Henry M. Ryan I, his great-grandfather who participated in the gold rush and wrote home to his family. Mr. Ryan also gave us the letters of Henry Ryan II, who served in the Civil War and wrote home to his mother. Ida Anna Ryan's papers were of particular interest to a young professional archivist with a feminist college mentor. Ms. Ryan was our donor's aunt. She was the first woman to receive a master's degree from MIT, was a renowned architect, and was an active suffragette. Here's the transcript from a sample document, and I wish I could show you. Right here is one of the sample documents from the collection, but we had a lot of old materials, and I've included some of the pictures in the book. But here's a sample. October 30th, 1852. Dear brother, I wrote you a letter on the 13th instant. I then told you that I was going to the mine, and I went, but they didn't prove to my liking. So I have returned to this place and have gone to work at carpenter work at $7 per day. See how the folks get along, and write to me all the news that you can find, and see that they have all they want if you can find it for them without injury to yourself. If I have my health, I shall be able to repay you shortly. 9 months later, Henry's brother received a letter that his Henry had been ill for about 2 weeks and then passed away. I wrote to Mr. Ryan, your donation is quite a valuable addition to the library. The Ryans play such a vital role in the city's consciousness. Researchers and others interested in Waltham will be very happy to have access to the documents of your ancestors. The records of other families in Waltham show what it was like to live among diverse immigrant populations. Taken together, these collections give a broad scope of life in the city, how it has changed over time, and how Waltham reflects changes in American culture in general. From the long-lived resident Ryan family to transient immigrants who helped shape the city's industrial roots, the records of Waltham's families in the public library, in the Historical Society, and the museum help preserve the history of urban development. Documenting growth while highlighting Waltham's historical place, personal papers form the backbone of community memory. From Mr. Ryan, I learned the value of an archivist reaching out and forming bonds with members of the community. My professional life and the collections I kept benefited from my meeting Mr. Ryan and the work we did to transfer his collection to the library over several months. I also gained much on a personal level from an elderly gentleman willing to share his family history with a young archivist. Together we helped to weave his story into the written record of Waltham and to deepen our own personal understandings of the community. Mr. Ryan was an inspiration to me, and I miss working with him. But collections like his show how important one family's collection can be to a community, and I hope you'll consider that when you go through your own papers and consider your own personal family archives. Thank you.